The Korean Mafia boss noticed his black maid, hiding her broken arm. The next morning, 15 men disappeared. On September 23, 2022, in the city of Suncheon, a quiet detail went unnoticed by most. A young foreign woman worked at an exclusive event, carefully keeping her arm still beneath her sleeve, as if moving it might expose something she fought to hide. Everything appeared normal at first glance, but only hours later, an unsettling twist emerged. 15 men connected to that very event disappeared from their daily routines, fading from Suncheon overnight. And at the center of this mystery stood the same young woman who tried to work as if nothing had happened. What truly unfolded in Suncheon that night? Before the story begins, follow our channel, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The golden light of the gala stretched across the polished wooden floor like liquid honey, warm and inviting to everyone except Amara Lewis. She moved through the crowd with practiced grace, her black dress simple but elegant, her posture straight despite the weight she carried, not on her shoulders, but hidden beneath the long sleeve of her left arm. The Suncheon Cultural Center had transformed into something magical that evening. Paper lanterns swayed gently from the ceiling, casting soft shadows that danced with the traditional Korean music filtering through expensive speakers. Important people, politicians, business leaders, families whose names appeared in newspapers, laughed and clinked crystal glasses filled with imported wine. They didn't see her. They never did. Amara had learned long ago that invisibility was part of her job description. A foreign woman with dark skin in a country where she would always stand out, yet somehow remain unseen. But invisibility had its price. She reached for a tray of empty glasses with her right hand, her left arm pressed against her ribs in a position that had become habitual over the past 3 days. The pain was there, constant and sharp, like broken piano strings vibrating inside her bones. She'd wrapped the arm tightly that morning, so tightly she could barely bend her elbow, and pulled the sleeve down to hide the purple bruises that bloomed like terrible flowers across her skin. Just get through tonight, she told herself. The same words she'd repeated like a prayer since arriving at the venue 2 hours earlier. Mama needs her medication. Mama needs you to keep this job. Breathe. Smile. Don't let them see. Across the room, a woman in a jade-colored hanbok laughed too loudly at something a man whispered in her ear. Amara watched them for a moment, wondering what it felt like to laugh without fear, to exist in a space without constantly calculating which movement would hurt least, which angle would hide the damage best. She turned toward the kitchen entrance, balancing 3 empty plates on her good arm, when the air in the room suddenly shifted. It wasn't a sound exactly, more like the feeling before thunder, when the atmosphere grows heavy and electric. Conversations didn't stop, but they changed. Voices became more careful, postures straightened. Even the music seemed to soften, as if making room for something, or someone, more important. Baek Moo-jin entered the gala like winter entering a warm house. He was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. His face was carved from something harder than marble, beautiful in the way a blade is beautiful, sharp, purposeful, dangerous. People moved aside without him asking, creating a path that led directly through the center of the room. Amara had heard whispers about him during her 6 months working these events. The staff spoke his name in hushed tones, always glancing over their shoulders first. Economic leader, they called him publicly. The ghost of Suncheon, they whispered privately. A man whose business empire stretched across the southern coast, whose influence made politicians nervous, whose enemies had a strange habit of relocating to distant cities without warning. She'd never seen him before tonight. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Amara's breath caught in her throat. His gaze wasn't like the others, those glances that slid past her as if she were furniture. Moo-jin looked at her the way a doctor examines an X-ray, seeing beneath the surface, reading what was written in the language of pain and pretending. His dark eyes narrowed slightly, and she watched something flicker across his expression. Concern? Recognition? She couldn't tell. Amara quickly lowered her gaze and turned toward the kitchen, but her left arm, stupid, damaged thing, caught the edge of the tray. The plates shifted. One slipped. She reached instinctively with her left hand to catch it, and the movement sent lightning through her entire body. The plate hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped. Amara stood frozen, her left arm clutched against her chest, her face a mask of controlled agony. The pain was so intense she saw stars at the edges of her vision. "Don't cry. Don't show them. Don't give them another reason to fire you." "I'm so sorry," she whispered in Korean, her accent heavy but practiced. "I'll clean this immediately. I'm so sorry." She knelt carefully, using only her right hand to gather the broken pieces, aware of dozens of eyes on her back. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the largest shards. One cut her palm, a thin line of red appearing against her dark skin, but she barely registered it. What was one more pain among so many? "Stop." The voice was quiet, but absolute. Amara looked up to find Baek Moo-jin standing directly in front of her, his polished shoes inches from the broken ceramic. Up close, she could see the silver threads in his black hair, the tiny scar beneath his left eye, the way his jaw tightened as he studied her. "Someone else will handle this," he said, not a suggestion, but a statement of fact. He gestured to a nearby staff member, who hurried forward with a broom. Amara tried to stand, but the world tilted dangerously. Moo-jin's hand appeared in her line of vision. Offered, not demanded. She stared at it for a moment. This hand that had probably signed orders that changed lives, that had built empires, that had done things she couldn't imagine. Slowly, she placed her right hand in his and let him help her up. "Your arm," he said softly, his eyes fixed on the way she held her left side. "How long has it been broken?" The question hit her like cold water. Amara opened her mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, to do what she'd done every time someone at work asked if she was okay. But something in his expression stopped her. He already knew. He was simply giving her the dignity of admitting it herself. 3 days, she heard herself whisper. "But I can work. I promise I can work. Please don't." Amara Lewis, her full name, spoken with perfect pronunciation, in a room full of strangers. She hadn't worn a name tag, hadn't been introduced, hadn't told anyone who she was beyond event assistant number 7. "How do you know my name?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Moo-jin's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes, something that looked almost like sadness. "I know many things, Ms. Lewis," he said quietly. "The question is, why are you standing here with a broken arm, serving people who would step over you if you collapsed?" Amara's throat tightened. "Because my mother is dying in a hospital bed 30 minutes from here, and her treatment costs more per week than I make in a month. Because I'm a foreign woman in a country that doesn't owe me anything. Because I have no choice. Because survival doesn't care about broken bones." But she didn't say any of that. She just stood there, one hand cradled against her chest, blood from her cut palm dripping slowly onto the pristine floor, while this dangerous stranger looked at her like she was something precious and broken. "I need this job," she finally whispered. Moo-jin nodded once, as if she'd confirmed something he suspected. Then he did something that made the entire room hold its breath. He removed his jacket, expensive, perfectly tailored, probably worth more than everything Amara owned combined, and placed it gently around her shoulders. "You'll keep your job, Ms. Lewis," he said. "But first, you're going to tell me exactly who did this to you." The jacket around Amara's shoulders felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, not because of its fabric, silk-lined wool that probably cost more than 3 months of her salary, but because of what it represented. In the span of 30 seconds, Baek Moo-jin had done something no one else in that glittering room had bothered to do. He had seen her, really seen her. The music had resumed, but it felt muted now, distant, as if someone had wrapped the entire gala in cotton. Amara stood frozen in place, acutely aware that every eye in the Sunshin Cultural Center had witnessed what just happened. A foreign assistant receiving the personal attention of the ghost of Sunshin himself. The whispers would start before she even left the building. I can't tell you," Amara finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. She pulled the jacket tighter with her good hand, feeling the warmth of it seep into her bones. "It's complicated." Moo-jin's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Something that looked like patience mixed with absolute certainty. "Complicated," he repeated, as if testing the word on his tongue. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Before Amara could respond, a movement across the room caught her attention. Seo Jun-taek, the son of Councilman Seo from the Sunshin district, stood near the dessert table with a champagne flute in his hand. He was watching them with an intensity that made Amara's stomach clench with familiar fear. His face was handsome in a classical way. Sharp jawline, expensive haircut, designer suit, but his eyes held something cold and entitled. 3 days ago, those same eyes had watched her struggle with heavy equipment boxes in the storage room. 3 days ago, those same hands had grabbed her arm when she'd politely declined his invitation for private drinks after the event. 3 days ago, when she'd tried to pull away, he'd twisted her arm with such casual violence that she'd heard something crack, then laughed and said, "That's what happens when people don't know their place." She'd reported nothing, complained to no one. Because who would believe a foreign woman over a councilman's son? Who would risk their position for someone like her? Juntaek's gaze shifted from Amara to Mujin, and his expression changed. The entitled smirk faded, replaced by something that looked almost like nervousness. He set down his champagne glass with more force than necessary, the crystal ringing out sharply in the elegant space. Mujin noticed. Of course he noticed. This was a man who built an empire by reading rooms, by understanding the unspoken language of fear and power. "You know who did this," Mujin said quietly, his eyes still on Juntaek across the room. It wasn't a question. Amara's throat went dry. She wanted to deny it, to protect herself from whatever storm was brewing in the charged air between these two men. But lying to Baek Mujin felt like trying to hide from the ocean. Pointless, and ultimately futile. "Please," she whispered instead. "I just need to finish my shift. My mother is at Suncheon General Hospital, 3rd floor, room 304. Mujin finished, his voice still quiet, but somehow carrying the weight of absolute knowledge. Stage 4 condition, requiring specialized treatment that costs approximately 4 million won per month. You work 3 jobs to cover the expenses, and you're still falling behind." Amara felt the blood drain from her face. "How do you—" "I told you, Ms. Lewis. I know many things." He turned to face her fully, and for the first time she saw something in his expression that looked almost gentle. "The better question is, why do you think you have to carry all of this alone?" Tears burned behind Amara's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. Crying here, now, in front of all these people, would be the final humiliation. "Because that's how life works," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "For people like me, anyway." Something shifted in Mujin's expression. A tightening around his eyes, a subtle tension in his jaw. He looked like a man who'd just made a decision, the kind of decision that couldn't be unmade. "Not anymore," he said simply. Across the room, a man in a dark suit appeared near Juntaek. He whispered something in the young man's ear, and Amara watched Juntaek's face go pale. The man in the dark suit gestured toward a side door, and after a moment's hesitation, Juntaek followed him out of the main hall. The entire exchange took less than 30 seconds, but Amara felt it in her bones. Something had shifted, something irreversible. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Nothing yet," Mujin replied, his tone almost conversational. "But I'm going to correct a situation that should never have happened in the first place." He looked down at her injured arm, still pressed protectively against her ribs. "You need medical attention. I can't afford—" "I'm not asking about your finances, Ms. Lewis. I'm stating a fact. You need medical attention, and you're going to receive it." He gestured to someone Amara couldn't see. Within moments, a woman in a professional suit appeared beside them, holding a tablet. "Ms. Park will take you to a private medical facility," Mujin said. "Your arm will be properly treated, and you'll be compensated for tonight's work, plus the 3 days you've suffered since the incident." Amara shook her head, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Mujin was silent for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. "Perhaps I know you better than you think," he finally said. "Or perhaps I simply recognize someone who deserves better than what this world has given them." He turned to leave, then paused. "Ms. Lewis, that jacket suits you. Keep it." And then he was gone, moving through the crowd like a shadow, leaving Amara standing in the middle of the gala wearing a jacket that cost more than her monthly rent, her broken arm throbbing, her mind spinning with questions she didn't dare ask out loud. But the biggest question, the one that would keep her awake for hours, wasn't about what Baek Mujin had done. It was about what he knew, and how he'd known her name before she'd ever spoken it. The private medical facility was nothing like the crowded public hospital where Amara's mother lay fighting for her life. This place existed in a different world entirely, One of hushed voices, pristine white walls, and the kind of efficiency that came from serving people who could afford to pay for silence along with their health care. Ms. Park, the woman in the professional suit, had driven Amara here in a sleek black car that smelled of leather and expensive cologne. She hadn't asked questions, hadn't made small talk, had simply guided Amara through automatic doors that whispered open like secrets being shared. Now, Amara sat on an examination table, her left arm finely exposed to the cool air-conditioned room. Without the sleeve to hide it, the damage looked worse than she'd imagined. Purple and yellow bruises bloomed across her forearm in the exact shape of fingers. 5 distinct marks where Juntaek had gripped her with enough force to crack bone. The swelling made her arm look foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Dr. Kim, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, examined the injury with gentle hands and a frown that deepened with each passing second. "This happened 3 days ago?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of professional concern mixed with something that sounded like anger. "Yes," Amara whispered. She'd been asked to tell the story 3 times now. Once to Ms. Park, once to the intake nurse, and now to Dr. Kim. Each telling felt like peeling back layers of skin, exposing something raw and shameful underneath. "And you've been working with this injury?" Dr. Kim's frown deepened. "Carrying trays? Moving equipment?" Amara nodded, unable to meet the doctor's eyes. "I didn't have a choice. My mother. I know about your mother," Dr. Kim interrupted gently. "Ms. Park briefed me on your situation." She paused, her hands still carefully palpating the swollen tissue. "This fracture could have become much worse. You're fortunate nothing shifted significantly, though I suspect you've been in considerable pain." Considerable pain. Such a clinical way to describe the fire that had lived in her arm for 72 hours. The way she'd bitten her lip until it bled during particularly bad moments. The nights she'd barely slept because any position sent lightning through her bones. "I need you to tell me exactly how this happened," Dr. Kim said, her voice dropping to something more personal, less professional. "Not for the medical record, that will say accidental injury if you prefer, but I need to know the truth." Amara's throat tightened. She'd been holding the story inside like a stone in her chest, heavy and sharp-edged. Part of her wanted to keep it there, to swallow it down and pretend it had never happened. That's what survivors did, wasn't it? They learned to carry their pain silently, to protect themselves by protecting their abusers. But another part of her, the part that had felt Baek Jin's jacket around her shoulders, that had heard him say, "Not anymore," with such absolute certainty, that part wanted to speak. "Seo Juntaek," she said quietly, and saying his name out loud felt like breaking a spell. "The councilman's son. 3 days ago, after an event at the Maritime Museum, he asked me to have drinks with him. When I said no, She swallowed hard. "He grabbed my arm and twisted it, said I needed to learn my place." Dr. Kim's expression hardened. "And you reported this to—" "No one." Amara's voice was barely a whisper now. "Who would believe me? Who would care? I'm a foreign worker and he's connected," Dr. Kim finished, her tone bitter. "Yes, I know how that story goes. I've treated too many women who've been told their truth doesn't matter as much as a powerful man's reputation." She squeezed Amara's good hand gently. "But you told someone tonight, didn't you? You told Baek Jin." "I didn't mean to," Amara said quickly. He saw. He knew something was wrong, and I couldn't lie to him." Dr. Kim was quiet for a moment, studying Amara's face with an expression that seemed to contain decades of unspoken understanding. "Baek Jin is not a gentle man," she said carefully. "His methods are complicated, but he has one rule that everyone in Suncheon knows. He does not tolerate those who hurt the vulnerable, especially not women. Especially not those who have no one else to protect them." A chill ran down Amara's spine. "What do you mean?" Before Dr. Kim could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or concern. "Your arm needs to be set and casted," she said, tucking the phone away. "It's going to hurt, but I'll give you something for the pain. Afterward, you'll need to rest for at least 6 weeks." 6 weeks? Amara's heart plummeted. "I can't. I have to work. My mother's treatment has been taken care of," Dr. Kim said quietly. "According to this message, all of your mother's medical expenses have been covered indefinitely. You're also being compensated for the time you'll need to recover." The room seemed to tilt sideways. Amara gripped the edge of the examination table with her good hand, trying to process what she'd just heard. That's not possible. Do you know how much her treatment costs? I do, Doctor, Kim replied. And apparently, so does Baek Mu-jin. She met Amara's eyes directly. He's made a decision about you, Ms. Lewis, about your situation. And when he makes decisions, they don't get unmade. Amara thought about Jun-taek's pale face as he'd been led from the gala. She thought about the man in the dark suit, the whispered conversation, the way Jun-taek had followed without argument, despite his usual arrogance. She thought about Mu-jin's words, "I'm going to correct a situation that should never have happened." "What's going to happen to him?" she whispered. "To Jun-taek?" Dr. Kim's expression was carefully neutral. "That's not my place to say, but I can tell you this. Sunshin is changing tonight, and you, whether you intended to or not, are at the center of that change." Later, after her arm had been set and wrapped in a pristine white cast, after Dr. Kim had given her pain medication that finally dulled the constant ache, Amara sat in the facility's quiet waiting room and stared at her phone. She had 17 missed calls from the event company, 6 text messages from coworkers asking if she was okay, and 1 notification that made her breath catch. A bank transfer, more money than she'd earned in 6 months of working 3 jobs, and a single message from an unknown number. "Rest tonight, Ms. Lewis. Tomorrow, we talk." Morning light filtered through the hospital windows like honey through cheesecloth, soft, golden, and impossibly gentle. Amara had barely slept, her mind spinning with questions that had no easy answers, her casted arm a constant reminder that her life had fundamentally changed in the span of a few hours. She'd come to Sunshin General Hospital at dawn, unable to wait any longer to see her mother. The night had been endless, filled with strange dreams where she walked through rooms that kept changing shape, where Baek Mu-jin's voice echoed from unseen corners, where Jun-taek's face dissolved into shadow. But nothing, no dream, no worry, no amount of sleepless anxiety, had prepared her for what she found when she arrived at her mother's room. The door to room 304 stood open, and from the hallway, Amara could hear voices. Not the tired, overworked tones of the nurses she'd come to know over the past months, but something different, something that sounded almost deferential. She stepped into the doorway and froze. Her mother's room had been transformed. The old flickering television had been replaced with a new flat screen. Fresh flowers, white chrysanthemums and pale pink roses, sat in expensive-looking vases on every available surface. The worn blankets had been swapped for soft, high-quality linens that looked like they belonged in a luxury hotel. Even the air smelled different, cleaner somehow, as if someone had scrubbed away months of institutional staleness. And there, beside her mother's bed, stood a woman in a crisp medical uniform that definitely didn't belong to the hospital's regular staff. "Ms. Lewis," the woman said, bowing slightly. "I'm Nurse Han. I've been assigned to your mother's specialized care team." "Specialized care team?" Amara's voice came out strangled. "What are you talking about? Who sent you?" Nurse Han's smile was professional but warm. "All of your mother's medical needs have been taken care of, Ms. Lewis. She'll receive round-the-clock monitoring, the latest treatments, and anything else required for her comfort." She gestured to a tablet on the bedside table. "The care plan has been approved by Dr. Choi himself. He's one of the top specialists in the country." Amara felt her knees go weak. Dr. Choi was the physician she'd begged to see 3 months ago, the one whose consultation fee alone had been more than she could afford. She'd been told there was a 6-month waiting list, that her mother's case wasn't urgent enough to justify expedited treatment, and now he was personally overseeing her mother's care. "Who did this?" Amara whispered, though she already knew the answer. "Who paid for all of this?" Nurse Han's expression remained professionally neutral. "I'm not at liberty to discuss financial arrangements, Ms. Lewis. I can only tell you that your mother is now receiving the highest standard of care available in South Korea." In the hospital bed, Amara's mother, Grace Lewis, who'd followed her daughter to Korea 5 years ago when there was nowhere else to go, who'd worked until her body betrayed her, who'd apologized every day for being a burden, stirred slightly. Her eyes fluttered open, still clouded with medication but clearer than they'd been in weeks. "Amara?" Her voice was paper-thin but present. "Baby, what happened to your arm?" Amara rushed to her mother's side, carefully taking her hand. "It's nothing, Mama. Just a small accident. But look at you. You have a new room set up. And Nurse Han says you're getting special treatment now. Her mother's fingers tightened weakly around Amara's. A man came to see me, she said, her words slow and careful. Yesterday evening, while you were working. He didn't give his name, just said he wanted to make sure I was comfortable. Amara's heart stuttered. A man? What did he look like? Tall, her mother said, a small smile playing at her lips despite her exhaustion. Wore an expensive suit, had kind eyes though, the kind that have seen too much but haven't forgotten how to care. He sat right where you're sitting now and asked me about you, about what you've been doing to take care of me, about how hard you've been working. Tears gathered in the corners of her mother's eyes. He said something I'll never forget. He said, "Your daughter has been carrying the world alone. That ends today." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. She pressed her good hand to her mouth, trying to hold back the sob that threatened to escape. All these months, working 3 jobs, sleeping 4 hours a night, watching her savings disappear into medical bills like water through a sieve, she'd told herself she could handle it. That strength meant never asking for help, never showing weakness, never admitting that sometimes the weight was too much. But Baek Mu-jin had seen through all of it, had seen her truth, without her having to speak it. "Ms. Lewis?" Nurse Han's voice was gentle. "There's someone here to see you. He's waiting in the family consultation room on this floor." Amara knew without asking who it was. The consultation room was small but private, with comfortable chairs and a window overlooking Sunshin's morning skyline. Baek Mu-jin stood by that window, his back to the door, wearing another impeccable suit, charcoal gray this time, with a black shirt that made him look like he'd been carved from midnight. He turned when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "You visited my mother," Amara finally said, her voice trembling with emotions she couldn't name. "You sat with her. You talked to her." "I did," Mu-jin replied simply. "I wanted to understand what you've been protecting, what you've been fighting for. And then you," Amara gestured helplessly with her casted arm. "You paid for everything. The treatment, the specialists, the care team. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" "Yes," he said, his tone suggesting the amount was irrelevant. "I know exactly how much it costs." "Why?" The question burst from her like something that had been building pressure for hours. "Why are you doing this? People they don't do things like this for strangers. There has to be something you want. There's always something." Mu-jin was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her face with that same intensity from the night before. "What I want," he said slowly, "is for you to stop believing that you have to earn basic human dignity. What I want is for you to understand that what happened to you 3 days ago was wrong, and that wrong things should be corrected. By you?" Amara's voice rose slightly. "You're going to correct the world's injustices?" "No," he said quietly. "Just yours." The tea pavilion sat on the edge of Sunshin Bay, where the water met the sky in shades of silver and pearl. It was a traditional structure, all dark wood and paper screens, the kind of place that existed outside of time, where emperors might have once discussed poetry, where monks might have contemplated enlightenment, where powerful men now made decisions that changed lives. Amara had been driven here by the same silent driver who'd picked her up from the hospital. The invitation, if it could be called that, had come through Miss Park. "Mr. Beck requests your presence at the Hyoraeum Pavilion at 2 o'clock. It's important." Now she sat across from Baek Mu-jin on cushions that were more comfortable than her own bed, a low table between them holding an elaborate tea service she didn't dare touch. Through the open screens, she could see the bay stretching endlessly, fishing boats dotting the water like punctuation marks in an unfinished sentence. Mu-jin poured tea with movements that spoke of years of practice, the liquid flowing from pot to cup in a perfect amber arc. He was alone, no bodyguards visible, no assistants hovering nearby, which somehow made him seem more dangerous rather than less. A man confident enough to be unprotected was a man who didn't fear anything. "Do you know why I brought you here?" he asked, sliding a cup across the table toward her. Amara wrapped her good hand around the warm ceramic, grateful for something to hold on to. "To explain what you've done," she ventured. "To tell me what happens next. To show you something," he corrected gently. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small object, placing it on the table between them. It was a pendant, silver, shaped like a crescent moon, with a delicate chain that caught the afternoon light. Amara recognized it immediately. It had belonged to her grandmother, the only piece of real jewelry her family had ever owned. She'd worn it to the Maritime Museum event 3 days ago, tucked beneath her uniform shirt like a secret piece of home. She'd lost it that night. In the struggle with Juntaik, the chain had broken, and she'd been too frightened and hurt to go back and look for it. "Where did you find this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "One of my people recovered it from the storage room at the Maritime Museum," Mujin said. "It was found near a stack of overturned equipment boxes. The same room where Seo Juntaik cornered you." Amara's throat tightened. The fact that he knew the exact location, the specific details of what had happened, spoke to a level of investigation that both comforted and terrified her. "You've been looking into this," she said. "Into me." "I've been correcting an injustice," he replied, his tone matter of fact. "There's a difference." He gestured to the pendant. "This belongs to you, but I wanted you to see it here, in this context, so you understand something important." "What's that?" Mujin's expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but something softer than his usual careful neutrality. "Evidence," he said simply. "Physical proof of what happened to you, in case you ever doubted your own story. In case anyone ever tried to make you believe you deserved what happened, or that you somehow invited it." The words hit Amara with unexpected force. She'd spent 3 days doing exactly that, questioning her own memory, wondering if she'd somehow given Juntaik the wrong impression, if her refusal hadn't been clear enough, if her very existence as a foreign woman in spaces where she didn't quite belong had somehow justified his violence. "I believe you," Mujin continued, his dark eyes holding hers. "But more importantly, I want you to believe yourself. What he did was wrong. Full stop. No qualifications, no excuses, no gray areas." Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes. "What did you do to him?" she asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "To Juntaik?" Mujin took a sip of his tea, considering his words carefully. "Nothing permanent," he said finally. "Nothing that will haunt him in ways he can't recover from. But he's been relocated, along with several others who've demonstrated similar patterns of behavior." "Relocated?" Amara repeated, the word feeling strange in her mouth. "Seo Juntaik is currently working at a rural community center in Gangwon Province," Mujin explained, his tone almost conversational. "He'll spend the next year teaching basic computer skills to elderly residents and helping maintain the facility. No family connections to leverage, no political power to hide behind. Just honest work in a place where his name means nothing." Amara stared at him, trying to process what she was hearing. You sent a councilman's son to rural community service?" "I suggested it would be in his best interest," Mujin corrected. His father agreed quite readily once certain information about his son's behavior, backed by testimonies from 14 other women over the past 3 years, was presented to him. He paused, letting that number sink in. 14, Ms. Lewis. You weren't the first, but if I have any say in the matter, you'll be the last. 14 women. The number made Amara's stomach turn. How many of them had stayed silent, like she almost had? How many had reported it and been ignored? How many had been told, implicitly or explicitly, that their truth mattered less than a powerful family's reputation? "The others," she said quietly. "What about them?" "They've been contacted if they wish to be," Mujin replied. "Some wanted to share their stories. Others preferred to move forward privately. All of them have been offered support. Medical, legal, financial, whatever they need. No strings attached." Amara picked up the pendant, the silver cool against her palm. "This is more than just about me, isn't it? This is about something bigger." For the first time since she'd met him, Mujin's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly, revealing something that looked almost like old pain. "I grew up watching powerful people hurt those who couldn't fight back," he said softly. "I watched my own mother work herself to exhaustion, watched her suffer indignities because she had no protection, no voice that anyone would hear. When I finally had the resources to change things, I made myself a promise. I would never ignore someone in need, not if I had the power to help." "But why me?" Amara whispered. "Of all the people in Sunshin who need help, why did you choose me?" Mujin's expression softened. "Because you walked into that gala with a broken arm and still tried to do your job," he said. "Because when I asked if you were okay, you apologized instead of asking for help. Because you reminded me of someone who deserved better than what this world gave her." He paused. "And because when I looked at you, I saw someone worth protecting." The tea had gone cold between them, but neither moved to pour more. Outside, the bay continued its eternal movement. Water meeting sky meeting shore in an endless conversation. "What happens now?" Amara asked finally. Mujin reached across the table and gently pushed the pendant closer to her. "Now," he said, "you rest. You heal. You spend time with your mother without worrying about money or jobs or men who think they can hurt you without consequences. And when you're ready, not when I say, but when you truly feel ready, we'll talk about what comes next." The week that followed felt like living in someone else's life. Amara had returned to her small apartment in the Yonhyangdong district, a modest place she'd chosen because the rent was cheap, and the landlady asked few questions. But everything felt different now. The walls seemed less confining. The water-stained ceiling looked almost poetic in the morning light. Even the sounds of the street below, which had always felt chaotic and overwhelming, now sounded like a kind of music. Her casted arm was healing well. The pain had subsided to a dull ache, manageable with the medication Dr. Kim had prescribed. But it was the other pain, the deeper, older kind that lived in her chest, that was changing in ways she couldn't quite articulate. For the first time in 5 years, Amara wasn't running, wasn't calculating how many hours she could work before her body gave out, wasn't checking her bank account with the sick dread of watching water drain from a sinking ship, wasn't lying awake wondering what would happen when the money finally ran out. Her phone buzzed on the small kitchen table where she sat drinking morning coffee. Real coffee. The good kind she'd always told herself was too expensive. The screen showed a news notification from the Sunshin Daily News. Major administrative restructuring in city government. Multiple officials reassigned. Amara clicked on the article, her heart beating faster as she read. The language was careful, bureaucratic, designed to hide truth beneath layers of official terminology. But the message was clear. 15 people connected to various city departments had been reassigned to positions better suited to their skills and experience. The article didn't name names, but it mentioned that Councilman Seo's office had been particularly affected by the restructuring. 15 people. The number echoed in her mind like a bell. Jun Taik had been just one. How many others had been quietly removed from positions where they could hurt vulnerable people? How many others had patterns of behavior that Baek Mujin's investigation had uncovered? Another message appeared on her phone. This one direct. "May I visit you this afternoon? There's something I'd like to discuss. Mujin." It was the first time he'd contacted her directly since their meeting at the tea pavilion 3 days ago. Amara stared at the message for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the reply button. The smart thing, the safe thing, would be to keep distance, to accept the help he'd given without getting further entangled in whatever world he inhabited. But safety, she was beginning to understand, wasn't the same thing as living. She typed back, "Yes, 2 p.m.? His response came immediately. "I'll bring decent coffee." Despite everything, the strangeness of the situation, the lingering fear that somehow this would all be taken away, Amara smiled. When Mujin arrived at precisely 2 o'clock, he carried not just coffee, but an entire bag from the expensive bakery near the train station, the one Amara had passed 100 times but never entered. He'd dressed down from his usual formal attire, dark jeans, a simple black sweater, leather jacket, but he still carried himself with that same quiet authority that made space bend around him. "Your apartment is exactly what I expected," he said, settling into the chair across from her at the small table. "Simple, practical, nothing wasted." "Is that a compliment?" Amara asked, accepting the coffee he offered. "It's an observation," he replied. "You've trained yourself to take up as little space as possible, to need as little as possible, to be as unobtrusive as possible." His dark eyes met hers. "But I wonder what kind of space you'd create if you didn't have to be so careful all the time." The question hung in the air between them, more profound than it seemed. Amara thought about the dreams she'd had when she first came to Korea. Dreams of graduate school, of research, of contributing something meaningful to the world. Dreams that had gotten smaller and smaller until they'd compressed into a single, desperate wish. "Just let my mother survive." "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I've forgotten how to dream beyond survival." Mujin nodded, as if this was exactly what he'd expected her to say. "I have a proposition for you," he said. "Not a demand, not an obligation. A genuine offer that you're free to refuse." Amara's stomach tightened with nervousness. "What kind of offer?" "My organization runs several legitimate businesses," he explained. One of them is a cultural foundation that promotes international exchange and supports foreign residents in Korea. We need someone to help develop programs, coordinate with community groups, advocate for people who face barriers, someone who understands what it's like to navigate this country as an outsider. He pulled a folder from his bag and placed it on the table. Inside were details, job description, salary information, benefits package. The numbers made Amara's breath catch. "This is real work," Moojin continued. "Not a pity position, not charity disguised as employment. You'd be valuable because of your experience, your perspective, your languages. The job is yours if you want it, but only if you genuinely want it." Amara's hands trembled as she looked through the papers. The salary was more than double what she'd been making from her 3 jobs combined. The benefits included full health coverage, not just for her, but for family members. Why? The question seemed to be the only word she could say to him anymore. "Why do you keep doing this?" Moojin was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "Do you remember what I said at the pavilion? About my mother?" Amara nodded. "She worked as a cleaner in office buildings," he said softly. "Came home with her hands cracked and bleeding from harsh chemicals, with her back bent from hours of scrubbing floors. She never complained, never asked for help, just worked herself to exhaustion because she believed that was what survival required." He paused, something painful flickering across his face. "She died when I was 17. Heart attack brought on by years of stress and untreated health conditions. She was 43 years old." "I'm sorry," Amara whispered. "I built everything I have on a simple principle," Moojin continued. "The people who work the hardest, who sacrifice the most, who keep society functioning through their invisible labor, those people deserve protection. They deserve dignity. They deserve to have someone powerful on their side for once." He met her eyes directly. "You don't remind me of my mother because you're suffering. You remind me of her because you're strong enough to survive things that would break most people. But strength shouldn't be a requirement for basic human respect." Amara felt tears spilling down her cheeks before she could stop them. For 5 years, she'd held herself together through sheer will, had refused to cry because crying felt like admitting defeat. But these weren't tears of sadness or desperation. These were something else entirely. Relief, maybe, or recognition, or the feeling of being truly seen for the first time. "I don't know how to accept this," she said through her tears. "I don't know how to trust that it's real." Moojin reached across the table and gently placed an envelope beside the job offer. "Then don't decide today," he said. "Take time. Think about it. Talk to your mother. And when you're ready, not when I want you to be ready, but when you genuinely feel ready, let me know." After he left, Amara opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a single card with an address and a simple message. "This is where hope lives. Come find it when you're ready." The hospital room had become a sanctuary of sorts. Amara spent her evenings there now, not out of duty or fear, but because she wanted to. Because for the first time in years, sitting with her mother didn't mean watching helplessly as life slowly drained away. It meant watching her heal, slowly, painfully slowly, but unmistakably healing. Grace Lewis looked different now. The grayish pallor that had haunted her skin for months had been replaced by something closer to her natural warm brown tone. Her eyes, which had been clouded with pain and medication, were clearer. She could sit up for longer periods, could hold conversations that lasted more than a few minutes before exhaustion claimed her. Tonight, she was watching her daughter with an expression that mixed maternal concern with something else, a knowing look that made Amara uncomfortable in the way only a mother's perception could. "You're different," Grace said softly, her voice still weak but present. "Something's changed in you this past week." Amara adjusted the blanket around her mother's legs, avoiding eye contact. "I'm just relieved you're getting better, Mama. That's all." "Don't lie to your dying mother," Grace said, and despite the words, there was humor in her tone. "I'm not dying anymore, thanks to your mysterious benefactor, so I can say that now without it being too morbid." Despite herself, Amara smiled. "You're terrible." "I'm honest," Grace corrected. "And honestly, baby, I want to know about him. This Baek Moo-jin who's turned our lives upside down." Amara's smile faded. She'd been avoiding this conversation for days, unsure how to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. "He's complicated," she said finally. "Most worthwhile people are," her mother replied. She patted the edge of the bed, inviting Amara to sit closer. Tell me what you're afraid of. The question cut through all of Amara's careful defenses. She sat down slowly, her casted arm resting in her lap, like a physical reminder of everything that had changed. I'm afraid it's not real, she whispered. I'm afraid I'll wake up and we'll be back where we were. You dying, me drowning, neither of us able to save the other. I'm afraid to trust this because I don't know how to survive losing it. Grace was quiet for a long moment, her thin fingers finding Amara's hand and holding it with surprising strength. Do you know what that man said to me when he visited? She asked. He said, your daughter has been carrying the world alone. That ends today. And then he said something else, something I think you need to hear. What? He said, I understand what it means to watch someone you care about suffer because the world is unjust. I won't let that happen to her anymore. Grace squeezed Amara's hand gently. Baby, that's not the voice of a man doing charity. That's the voice of someone who sees you, really sees you. Amara felt her throat tighten with emotion. But what does he want from me, Mama? People don't do things like this without wanting something in return. Maybe he wants exactly what he said, Grace suggested. Maybe he wants to protect someone who reminds him of pain he couldn't prevent before. Maybe he wants to use his power for something good instead of just profitable. She paused, studying her daughter's face. Or maybe he wants what anyone wants when they meet someone rare, to know them better, to be close to them, to see where that connection might lead. The implication hung in the air between them. Amara shook her head quickly. Mama, it's not like that. He's not, we're not, why not? Grace interrupted gently. Why couldn't it be like that? You're a beautiful, intelligent woman who spent 5 years sacrificing everything for me. Maybe it's time you let someone sacrifice something for you. Before Amara could respond, there was a soft knock on the door. Nurse Han entered, carrying a small envelope. Ms. Lewis, this was just delivered for you. The messenger said it was urgent. Amara took the envelope with trembling hands. Her name was written on the front in elegant handwriting, but there was no return address. Inside was a single folded note and something small wrapped in tissue paper. The note read, Your mother mentioned she used to love the cherry blossoms in Washington, D.C. The garden at the address I gave you has a similar view. She's welcome to visit when she's well enough. Until then, a small reminder that spring always comes, even after the longest winters. M. Amara unwrapped the tissue paper carefully. Inside was a delicate hairpin, carved from pale wood in the shape of a cherry blossom branch. It was simple but exquisite, the kind of craftsmanship that spoke of hours of careful work. Grace leaned forward to see it, her eyes widening. Oh, baby, she breathed. That's not a gift from someone who doesn't care. That's a gift from someone who pays attention. Amara's vision blurred with tears. The detail, the fact that Mu Jin had asked her mother about her life, her memories, her joys, spoke to a level of care that went beyond obligation or duty. He hadn't just fixed their immediate problems. He'd listened to who they were as people. When did he visit you? Amara asked. What else did you talk about? Grace smiled, a glint of something mischievous in her eyes. He asked about you, mostly. What you were like as a child, what you dreamed about, what made you laugh. I told him about the time you tried to save every stray cat in the neighborhood, how you used to read medical journals at 12 years old because you wanted to cure everything. Her expression softened. I told him you've spent your whole life trying to fix broken things, but you've never learned how to let someone help fix you. Mama, Amara whispered, her voice breaking. He listened to every word, Grace continued. And at the end, he said something I'll never forget. He said, she won't be broken anymore. I promise you that. She reached up and gently touched her daughter's cheek. Baby, I've seen powerful men my whole life. Men who take what they want and call it business. Men who use people and call it strategy. That's not what I saw in his eyes when he talked about you. What did you see? Recognition, Grace said simply. The way you look at someone when you realize they understand a part of you that you thought was invisible. The way you look at someone who might matter more than you're ready to admit. Amara held the cherry blossom pin in her palm, feeling its weight. So light, yet somehow containing everything. Outside the window, Sunshin's night sky was scattered with stars, each one a distant promise that light existed even in darkness. Her phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number, but Amara knew who it was. Your mother told me you love reading late at night. The Cultural Foundation has a library. Come see it tomorrow if you'd like. No pressure, no expectations. Just books and quiet and the possibility of something new. Grace was watching her with that knowing mother's look again. What does it say? An invitation, Amara replied softly, to see where hope lives. Then go, Grace said, squeezing her hand one more time. Stop being afraid of good things, baby. You've earned them. Now go claim them. The address led Amara to a place she'd walked past dozens of times, but never truly noticed. A traditional Hanok building nestled between modern structures in the Joridong district, its curved roofline and wooden beams somehow maintaining dignity despite being surrounded by glass and steel. A discreet sign near the entrance read, Suncheon Cultural Foundation, in both Korean and English. She stood outside for several minutes, the cherry blossom pin secured in her hair, her casted arm hidden beneath a light jacket. The morning air was cool and carried the scent of pine from nearby Suncheonmun Bay. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the call of migratory birds, black-faced spoonbills perhaps, the ones that came to the wetlands every year seeking refuge. She understood how they felt. The door opened before she could knock, and there he was. Baek Mujin, dressed in simple dark clothes that somehow made him look more approachable than his expensive suits ever had. His eyes found hers immediately, and something in his expression softened, a warmth that transformed his usually careful features into something almost vulnerable. You came, he said, and there was relief in his voice, as if he genuinely wondered whether she would. You said there were books, Amara replied, aiming for lightness, but hearing the tremor in her own voice. Among other things. He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. Welcome to the Foundation. Welcome to what I hope might become something important for you. The interior was breathtaking. Traditional Korean architecture blended seamlessly with modern comfort. Heated floors, soft lighting, walls lined with books in multiple languages. But what caught Amara's attention was the garden visible through floor-to-ceiling windows at the back of the building. Cherry trees, dozens of them, their branches heavy with pale pink blossoms that drifted like snow in the morning breeze. You brought spring inside the city, she whispered. I brought it for people who needed reminding that winter doesn't last forever, Mujin corrected gently. He walked toward a low table where an envelope sat, sealed with red wax. This is for you. But before you open it, I need to tell you something. Amara's heart hammered against her ribs. What? Mujin was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. 15 people were relocated, he said finally. Not just Juntaek. 15 individuals who'd used their positions to hurt vulnerable people. Foreign workers, young women, those without connections or protection. The investigation started because of what happened to you, but it uncovered a pattern that had existed for years. I know, Amara said softly. I saw the news. What the news didn't say, Mujin continued, is that every single one of those people had files, documentation of complaints that were ignored, testimonies that were buried, evidence that disappeared. The system was designed to protect them, not their victims. He moved closer, and Amara could see something in his expression that looked like old anger, mixed with newer determination. I can't fix every broken system in Korea, he said, but I can fix the ones that touch people I care about. I can make sure that what happened to you, what happened to my mother, doesn't keep happening unchallenged. People I care about, Amara repeated quietly. Is that what I am to you? Mujin's expression shifted, uncertainty flickering across features that usually projected absolute control. I don't know how to explain what you are to me, he admitted. I saw you at that gala, injured and frightened, but still standing, still trying, and something in me recognized something in you, like looking at a reflection I didn't know I needed to see. He gestured to the envelope. Open it. Amara's hands shook as she broke the wax seal. Inside wasn't a job contract or legal document. It was something much simpler and infinitely more profound. A handwritten letter, several pages long in elegant script. She began to read, and with each line, her vision blurred with tears she didn't try to hide. The letter detailed everything, not just the logistics of what he'd done, the medical arrangements, the financial support, the job offer, but why? He'd written about his mother, about watching her fade while he was too young and powerless to help, about building his empire not just for wealth or influence, but as a shield against the kind of injustice that had stolen her life, about seeing Amara at the gala and feeling something crack open inside him, a recognition that transcended logic or reason. Near the end, he'd written, "You asked me why I'm doing this," as if kindness requires justification beyond simple humanity. But the truth is more complicated than altruism. I'm doing this because seeing you suffer while pretending to be fine reminded me of every moment I watched my mother do the same. I'm doing this because you deserve someone powerful enough to protect you, choosing to do exactly that. And I'm doing this because when I look at you, I see someone I want to know beyond the crisis that brought us together. Someone I want to trust me, the way I already trust you to be exactly who you are. Strong, resilient, and worthy of every good thing you've convinced yourself you don't deserve. The final paragraph made her breath catch. This foundation exists to help people like you, people who've been failed by systems designed to keep them invisible. But if you choose to work here, you should know it's not charity disguised as employment. I need someone who understands what it means to survive against odds that should have broken them. I need someone who sees vulnerability not as weakness, but as a form of strength. I need you, Amara Lewis. Not because you remind me of loss, but because you remind me of what hope looks like when it refuses to surrender. Amara looked up to find Mujin watching her with an expression that held no masks, no careful calculation, just raw, honest uncertainty about whether she would accept what he was offering. "The job is real," he said quietly. "The support for your mother is permanent, with no conditions. You can take both, take one, or take neither. Whatever you choose, nothing changes about the help you've already received. You don't owe me anything, Amara. You never did." She stood slowly, the letter still clutched in her hand, and walked to where he stood near the garden windows. Outside, cherry blossoms continued their slow dance toward the ground, each petal a small act of letting go. "I don't know how to trust this," she whispered. "I don't know how to believe that someone would do all of this without expecting something impossible in return." "Then, don't trust it yet," Mujin replied gently. "Just stay. Work here if you want. Let me prove that not everyone who offers help is hiding cruelty underneath. Let me show you what it looks like when someone powerful decides to use that power to protect instead of exploit." Amara felt something break inside her chest. Not painfully, but like ice melting after a long freeze. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay, I'll stay." And there, in the quiet morning light with cherry blossoms falling like blessings outside, Baek Mujin smiled. A real smile, unguarded and beautiful, and Amara finally understood what her mother had seen in his eyes. Not pity, not obligation, but recognition, the rarest gift of all, being truly seen, truly valued, by someone who had no reason to lie. In the end, her story reminds us that sometimes the quietest voices carry the heaviest burdens, and the smallest decisions can redraw the entire landscape of a life. She stood alone in a room full of powerful people, carrying a pain no one else bothered to see. And yet, from that moment of isolation came an unexpected shift, a reminder that protection can appear from places we never imagined. If you had been in her position, hiding your suffering to survive another day, would you have found the courage to speak, even in a whisper? But courage is rarely loud. It is the trembling choice to trust again when the world has taught you to fear every hand extended in your direction. What would you have done if someone you barely knew offered safety without asking anything in return? Would you have stepped forward, or would you have turned away, afraid of what accepting help might mean? Stories like hers force us to question the invisible weight we all carry, and the moments when a single act of kindness can shift everything. Let this ending linger with you. Lives change not only through grand gestures, but through the quiet understanding that no one deserves to face darkness alone. And perhaps the real mystery is not what happened to those 15 men, but what happens inside a person's heart when they realize for the first time that they are finally safe.